Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have a preview and prediction video to get into here. It is the 2024 ATP Finals between Yannick Sinner and Taylor Fritz. Now, I really want to delve into this one in detail. And the reason why is because it's a very interesting matchup. It's the rematch of the US Open final from this year, plus the two also played in the group stages, and Yannick Sinner came out on top in both very competitive straight set victories in the end. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty and I give you guys my tactical breakdown and also my prediction, please do remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do also leave a comment and let me know your thoughts on who you think is going to win and why, and also any comments on the video. Also, do share it if you think it's shareable. And on top of that, if you're listening on a podcast platform, give us a rating, give us a review. I'm not going to tell you what to write and what to rate us, but everything helps. So appreciate all of you. And on top of that, also shout out to our members. Thank you for supporting us. And if you do want to become a member and get early access to a bunch of videos, then do make sure to become a member. You also get access to some cool emojis and also some member only content as well. So let's get into this then. So first of all, let's talk about their form during the tournament and how they've looked. So Sinner hasn't dropped a single set, and he's looked very good. Topped his group, which consisted of Demona, Taylor Fritz, and Daniel Medvedev. So very impressive from him. Of course, Fritz was second, and the only match that Fritz lost was against Yannick. Both players that went into semi-finals, and Sinner ended up playing against Casper Ruud, demolished him 6-1, 6-2. Fritz came up against Alexander Zverev, who he'd beaten 3 times in the last few months. It was 3 consecutive wins, that is. He made it 4, beating him in a final set tiebreak in a very competitive, tight match, but extremely impressive from the American. He's actually the only player, by the way, to beat Alexander Zverev 4 times in a year. Or sorry, he's the first player to beat Alexander Zverev consecutively 4 times, or 4 times consecutively even. So he clearly has an advantage in the head-to-head there, and a bit of a mental, I would say, a mental advantage, I think is fair to say. And that was an impressive win from Taylor and just shows the caliber of player he has become in 2024. I think prior to this year, he really struggled with that matchup with Zverev, and also the fact that he's beaten players this tournament like Medvedev and Zverev. And before this year, he would have been a big underdog. He would have lost to those players regularly. This year, he's now up there. He's going to end the year ranked number 4 at least in the world. So that is extremely impressive from him. For Yannick Sinner, of course, number 1 in the world, undefeated, and the Australian Open and US Open champion, goes into this final as a big favourite, of course. Taylor Fritz, has beaten Sinner once, but that was in 2021 at Indian Wells. Since then, Yannick's beaten him at Indian Wells, the US Open, and also the ATP Finals in the last 2 years. And, I think it's clearly a matchup where Taylor struggles, and as do pretty much as does pretty much everyone on tour at the moment on hard court. They just struggle to really get to grips with how to combat Sinner. And I think there's a lot of game plans that have been employed that are probably the right game plans, and people are even executing them, but they're just not able to execute them well enough to actually beat Sinner, because he's got such an incredibly good game for hardcore at the moment, and that's just the way it is, and on all surfaces as well, but especially on hardcore, I think it's fair to say. So strategically, we can break this down, but if I'm being honest, there's going to be a lot to talk about because Taylor played really well in the round robin match. He also played pretty well, I thought, in the US Open final. Yet both those matches, he ended up losing in straight sets. Now, Sinner was outplayed for parts of the round robin match. It was 5-4 in the first and second sets on Taylor's serve, where Sinner broke him and ended up taking the set 6-4 in both instances. So there's a bit of, I think, Sinner maybe playing better in the real crunch moments, coming out clutch in those real pressure points, you'd say. And for Fritz, what can he do better? What he needs to do is, in my opinion, and it's not going to be easy, is take that performance that he had in a round robin match against Sinner and increase his level between 5 to 10%. And if he does that, he gives himself a very good chance of at least taking a set and who knows, even potentially winning. But I would say maybe I think increase by 10%. I think it's probably fair because I think Sinner had some gears to go through and he showed that in the 5-4 games in both sets. Fritz, I think, he seemed like he was maxed out, but he was playing a really, really high level. And when I say high level, he was actually dominating a lot of the forehand to forehand rallies and exchanges across court from that juice side. In the ad court battle, and I talked about this in my post match analysis for Sinner versus Rude. Sinner dominates that exchange, and it's very akin to Novak, who has won matches by absolutely just bullying people in that battle, and he's just so good. He's probably the best to ever control the ad court and deal with that I guess nuance to tennis matches, that aspect even of tennis matches. So for Sinner, he's able to best Taylor in the backhand to backhand, I think, and just in the into out forehand into the Taylor's backhand. It doesn't play out very well for Taylor generally. He's able to do enough to kind of stick with Sinner generally in that exchange for the first few shots, but then it starts to get a little bit tricky for him. So I think what Taylor's going to have to do is be a bit brave, and as soon as he gets something just slightly short, or maybe he isn't hit as maybe he isn't hit like a rocket, as Sinner tends to hit his ground strokes like, then he needs to be the one to take the first step in trying to dictate in the point and try and be the one on the front foot. Now, whether that means going line with the backhand or going slice cross court, even, there just needs to be something to really get Sinner thinking about what Fritz is doing. Because what Rude was doing, for example, against Sinner, was being quite predictable in how he was playing, in the patterns of play, and Sinner just tore him apart. Fritz has to play in a way that really gets Sinner to think twice about, really committing to, say, one side for a pass, or committing to, having his weight on one side in a rally, knowing that, okay, if I drag Taylor out, he's going to go cross court because it's a safer shot. He's not going to go line. So I know that I can almost wait in the forehand corner, right, for it. Now, for me, I think Yannick is just so good for the baseline right now that it's tough for Fritz to best him in those exchanges in the big moments. And Fritz's game is primarily built upon power baseline hitting. That is his game style, right? What he did really well, I thought, against Sinner, and he didn't necessarily execute it well, but I thought the strategy was right, was trying to come forward and short to the points at times when he could, and especially at the net. I thought that was really, really important. And for me, that was the right ploy. He just doesn't have great hands, if I'm being honest, and it's something that he can improve on. But it's something that he should be doing in Sinner because I feel like in the longer exchanges, Sinner has the better shot tolerance. So Taylor has come out in the round robin match and in parts of the US Open final and being super aggressive with the forehand, try to be on the front foot. That is the right plan. What he's going to have to do, which is not easy, is play that way aggressively, but limit the errors somehow. And that might mean redlining at times during this match, but limit the errors and play better in and around the net. Whether that means the drop shot, whether that means volleying, whether that means just the little, cat and mouse points in and around the net. He needs to play and win a higher percentage of those points. One thing that's going to be really key as well is, of course, the serve. He served really well against Alexander Zverev. He needs to do the same against Sinner. His first serve percentage needs to be high. But of course, as we always say, first serve percentage is not the main metric. What is really important is, yes, making a high percentage of first serve is great, but then make sure you're winning also a high percentage of your first serve points won. I think his first serve percentage needs to be above 70%, and he needs to be winning at least 70% of those first serve points. That's how I see it. And the reason I say that is because his second serve is going to get devoured by Yannick. Yannick is going to step on the second serve and he is going to pressure Fritz throughout the whole match off his second serve. He did so in the round robin. He'll do the same in this final. And the way he played against Rude, I think, was a level above the level he showed against Fritz. I think that is what's going to be scary for Fritz, even if he's not turning up with his not just A game, his A plus game. If it's, I think it's fair to say. So, in terms of how he wins, because there's no point talking about how Sinner wins because we know how he wins. He's a big favorite. For Fritz, there's a couple of factors. Let's summarize. One, needs to serve really well, high percentage of first serves made, and also high percentage of first serve points won. That means hitting with variation on his serve and really going for the corners, going for his spots, not being safe on it. And on top of that, making sure that he is proactive and aggressive with that plus one shot. And that means generally dictating with that forehand, going big for that first shot to try and get on the front foot and ensure that Sinner's not able to bring the point back to neutral straight away off return or even a couple of shots into the rally. The majority of points won in tennis are won during the first. What they say is the first couple of shots of a rally dictate whoever has the momentum in those first couple of shots. So I think it's 3 or 4 shots in a point. Whoever has the momentum swing in those 3 and 4 points at the end of it, more likely than not, goes on to win the point. So that's why we always talk about serve return being important. And for Fritz, it's going to be extremely important to keep Sinner guessing, make sure he's not able to read his serve, and be aggressive behind it. So that's number one. Number two is ensure that he's not passive in the rallies. He needs to go for his shots, try and be the one dictating in the rallies, and try and limit errors. And to try and say try and limit errors is just crazy, but it's easier said than done. Like, how do you limit errors, right? Now, the way to limit errors is to play with bigger margins and bigger targets and not go line, for example, 2 meters behind the baseline and 2 meters wide, off the tram lines. But what we're saying is that actually Taylor needs to be aggressive. Now, I normally talk about calculated aggression. Yeah, that will be key for Taylor, but I do think he's going to have to take more risk than maybe he might be comfortable with. But he needs to embrace that, I think, in this. And he may miss a few shots, he may make some errors, but generally speaking, as long as his winner to unforced error ratio is more than 1, and I think it probably needs to be around 1.5, then he's probably putting himself in a decent position. That leads me to the third point, which is his net play. He needs to be better at the net than he was in the round robin. The intent was there, but he needs to be better. I think one with his approach shots. I didn't think his approach shots were top notch and they need to be. He needs to go and make sure that there aren't any half measures with that approach shot, and then also ensure that he is volleying better. He needs to either be hitting a drop volley or a deep volley, nothing in between. And he also needs to be clever with his direction. One thing that Rude did for a couple of points, and I've seen some other players do against Sinner, and it's really important. And this is the fourth point: is to keep Sinner guessing on direction and also on court positioning within the court. Now that means the drop shot for Taylor is important, and Sin is extremely quick. So you add it in as a variation to make sure that he's on his toes. He's not always just camping on the baseline, during the rallies and just bullying him from the baseline. But also what it means, right? And this is really, really important, I think, for me when we talk about court positioning, is also going in behind Yannick. So when they're at a point, especially if it's, for example, a good serve, a good return from Fritz, is if you're on the front foot, it's fine to get Yannick moving side to side. But sometimes you just need to just give yourself that extra split second just to get Sinner to commit to one side from a corner and then go in behind him. That's going to be key for some of the rallies when Fritz is on the front foot, but also his volleying. It's actually a very, very, very smart tactic. Now, of course, you need to have variation with you can't just continually do it because Sin will start reading it. But it's something that a lot of players don't always tend to do because you always think, oh, I should get into the open court, and that's fine. But sometimes if you just hold off, just give yourself that extra split second and get your opponent to commit, you then got an easy shot in behind them. And it ends up being a winner because they're off balance and they're struggling to then recover. So those are my main points, I think, for Taylor. I'm not sure whether he can do better, in honesty, in the ad court exchange. I just think that is what it is. And I think as I said, he's just going to have to be the more proactive one in those exchanges and try and get out of that pattern. There's not really much else to say. I think the only other thing that you could say in terms of a fifth factor is if Sinner has an off day, and it's possible. But as Carlos said about Sinner, he tends to play in 9 out of 10 consistently in almost every match. That's his level. Yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe he plays at least an 8 in every match. I'd say out of 10. I think that's probably fair. I don't think he ever really dips below that. Definitely doesn't dip below a 7, I would say. That's for sure. And for Fritz, he's obviously prone to potentially dropping in level, but he's been very good this week, and he's had a very good year. So he just needs to put his best foot forward and hope, I would imagine, that Sinner doesn't play his best, and that's possible. And also, I think he needs to hope that Sinner doesn't have a great serving day, because if he can get some looks in on the Sinner service games, we know how good Sinner is at holding and saving break points. He's got the highest percentage of break points saved in men's tennis on tour since 2024 started. So he is extremely hard to break, but it's not impossible. So yeah, Fritz, as he said after, very much he needs to back himself and really believe in the tennis he's playing and go out there with conviction in his game plan and also in his level and try and flip the script from that round robin defeat. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. I'm going to go with Sinner in straight sets. I hope it's not the case, but I think it may be probably 2 competitive sets again. But I'm struggling to see how Fritz is going to even take a set right now. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. Leave in the comment section anyway, guys. Thanks so much. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.